As great as moving from one state to another can be, it can also lead to a lot of stressful situations. For instance, figuring out how you're going to get all your belongings and furniture from your old home to the new one is something that stressed me out a bunch when I was moving from Utah to Kentucky about 3 years ago. And little did I know, that was only the beginning of my problems. After thinking about it a lot and determining my budget, the family and I decided that it would be smart to rent a U-Haul, load it with all of our belongings, and then I would drive to our new home. I would then make the trip back, and the whole family would get into our car and head to our new house. When the day came for me to finally make the first leg of the trip, we spent all day loading up everything that we were bringing into the back of the U-Haul van that I had rented and got started on the drive. I decided to begin the trip around 8 p.m. so that I wouldn't have to deal with any traffic at all, and I could just drive through the night without any problems. And for a while, things were going really well. The road was relatively empty, and I was making really good progress. It wasn't until about 2:30 in the morning that I noticed that the van was running low on fuel, and I had to look for a gas station. I eventually saw a sign that let me know that there was a gas station just off the next exit. So sure enough, I pulled off the highway and made my way to the gas pumps. The gas station looked like it had been constructed in the mid-1900s and had not been taken care of at all. The sign was hardly lit up, despite the fact that they were clearly still open, and the entire side of the building was covered in peeling paint and graffiti. Thankfully, it looked like I was the only one at the gas station at the time, so I didn't have to worry about any strange interactions. I ran in and paid for the gas before pumping it into the van and getting ready to get back on the road when I realized that I hadn't used the bathroom since I left home, and I actually had to go pretty bad. I looked back to the gas station and at first even wondered if they had a restroom or not, which was when I noticed a small wooden sign that said men's room and pointed toward the side of the building. As I looked down toward the side of the building, I thought to myself that it might be smarter for me to find another place to stop down the road that would hopefully seem less shady, but I really couldn't hold it. So I ended up going against my gut that was telling me to leave the gas station and never look back, and decided to go in and ask the clerk for the key. The young man behind the counter informed me that it was never locked and that I could just use it, which was another sign that I should have taken to not use the bathroom. Nevertheless, I made my way around the side of the building and into the dimly lit bathroom, which was just as worn down and disgusting as I expected. I noticed that the single stall that was in there was closed, so I went over to the urinal. But before I could even use the bathroom, I heard the door open. At first, I thought it was the door to the parking lot, but it turned out to be the stall that was closed a second ago. I turned to look over my shoulder, and before I could even catch a glimpse of who was there, I felt something smack into the side of my head. I collapsed to the floor and my vision had gone blurry from my head wound. I could hardly move my arms as I felt the man begin to pick through my pockets. He took my wallet out of the back pocket, but even worse, he managed to grab the keys to the U-Haul with all my family's things in the back. It took me nearly 5 minutes to get off the floor and make it out of the bathroom. And by the time I was in the parking lot, the van was nowhere to be found. I had to use the phone in the gas station and reported it to the police, and I ended up needing to get 3 staples in the back right side of my head. By the time they found the van, all of our belongings were gone. In 2014, my younger brother finally graduated from high school, and much like they did for me, my parents threw him a small party for friends and a few of our cousins. I've been living 2 towns over at this point, and because of my busy work schedule, I only really saw my brother every couple of weeks or so. But since it was a big deal, and I wanted to congratulate him, I took off from work and made sure to be at the party. It was great, and I will never forget how happy he was to make it out of high school. Now, the party ended up going pretty late into the evening, but I had to work the next morning, so I was only able to stay until 9 p.m. before making the hour-long drive home. The drive wasn't too bad, aside from the fact that it was mostly back roads, which meant a lot of windy turns and dark roads. And at the time, the headlights on my car weren't too great, The bulbs were really dull and the fuse was a bit fickle, so they wouldn't always stay on. So as I drove at night, I would just keep my hand on the headlight toggle, and whenever they would turn off, I would mess with it until they would pop back on. It was annoying, but something that I quickly got used to doing. So that night, as I was on my way home, I was pleasantly surprised to see that the roads were all empty. It looked like I was going to be home quicker than I expected since I was able to go a little faster. However, after I had been driving for about 40 minutes or so, I noticed something in the distance up ahead of me. I could see the reflection of my lights off of someone else's brake lights that had been parked on the side of the road. Now the brake lights weren't on, so I thought the car had died and that maybe they needed some help. I had jumper cables in the back of my car, so then I thought to myself that the least that I could do would be to pull over and ask if they needed assistance. I pulled right up behind the parked vehicle, which I could see now was a truck with a cap on the back of it, and it looked like the driver was actually pulling something out of the back. As I pulled the car to the side of the road, I hit a small bump, which caused the headlights to turn off for a second. I quickly pressed the brake and began to toggle them off and on until they worked. And when they finally blinked back on, I nearly jumped out of my seat. The driver of the truck was now facing my direction and had taken a step toward the hood of my car. I could see a red smear across the front of his green t-shirt. And as I looked past him, I noticed what he was pulling out of his truck. I couldn't see exactly what it was, but it was tall and had been wrapped up in some sort of blanket or cloth. My stomach turned as my eyes focused back on the man who appeared to be glaring right at me. Everything in my body was telling me to run, so I moved my foot from the brake and began turning the steering wheel and rolling back toward the road before pulling away as fast as I could. I'm not sure what it was, but I could hear the sound of something hitting my car as I pulled past the man. I continued to drive down the road as I called 911 and reported that I saw something suspicious. I'd let the operator know that I wasn't sure what exactly I saw, but that I thought it was a dead body. It was only a matter of minutes before the police arrived, and I had directed them to the location where I had seen the truck. But by the time we got there, the truck and the man were long gone. The police searched the woods near that area, and it didn't take long at all before they found the body, about 10 feet away from the road. Wrapped inside a blue comforter was the body of a young man who the police say died from a gunshot wound. I gave the police a description of the truck as well as the man who I saw standing outside of it. It took nearly 2 years for the man to actually be apprehended, but the police ended up finding the man in Nashville driving around a truck that fit the description that I had given them. I always thought I was pretty lucky compared to the other girls that I knew. Growing up, I didn't really have to deal with too many people bothering me, and I had never been followed by anyone before. That was until I began working at Hannaford's, the grocery store in the town where I grew up and went to school in. The job itself wasn't too bad. I was a cashier and eventually made it into shift leader, but there was one customer that I would hope to never see again. He used to come in almost once a day and always came down my register lane to make small talk with me. The man couldn't have been less than 10 years older than me, and he was always asking me personal questions. I knew things were getting really bad though, when I noticed that he started to hang out around the parking lot on the nights that I worked the closing shift. It even got so bad that one night, I had one of the overnight stalkers walk me out to my car. And then he went over and talked with the guy about how I was uncomfortable. And finally, he stopped showing up. There was about a 3-week period where I didn't have to worry about it at all. At least, that's what I thought. Things got infinitely more terrifying on the night that I was closing. And as I began making my way out to my car, I noticed that there was someone parked a few spots down from me that seemed to just be sitting in their car. I tried not thinking anything of it, and I just rushed over to my car and got inside before locking the doors. I gave myself a second to breathe and then began making my way home. However, as soon as I pulled out of my parking spot, I saw their headlights turn on. Sure enough, the car that had been sitting in the parking lot pulled out and began following behind me. I told myself that it was just a coincidence and they were probably just leaving at the same time as me. That didn't help me much though, as the car continued to get closer and closer behind me. At times during the drive, I couldn't even see their headlights in the rearview mirror because they were so close to me. I drove around for about 20 minutes, doing my best to tell myself that I was going to be all right. But as we got closer to my house, I knew that I couldn't let this person keep following me. That's when I decided to get the police involved. I called them using Bluetooth on my phone and told them that I was being followed. They asked me what road I was on and told me to keep driving around as if nothing was wrong and the police would be there soon. I did exactly what I was told, and in no time at all, I could see flashing lights pulling up behind me in the car that was following me. I pulled off to the side of the road and expected the car behind me to do the same, but to my surprise, they just sped off attempting to flee from the police. One officer stayed behind with me, while the other maintained a close distance from whoever was following me. The officer who stayed with me received a call over the radio and let me know that they had the person in custody. It turned out to be the man that used to wait for me outside of work, and the police could not get a solid reason out of him for following me. I ended up filing for a restraining order, and he was permanently banned from Hannaford's I worked at for the safety of myself and other employees. Ever since that incident, I carry a small can of mace that attaches right to my keychain.